Hi there, my name is Steve Gerhardt, and as always, this is the Unagi Observer. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching the video this week. Hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. Let us know what anime you watched before you had the wonderful turkey on that wonderful food holiday. But for now, we're going to talk about a kaiju movie, the fourth out of 5 kaiju movies that I'm going to talk about this season, and it's ranked as the 56th greatest movie of all time by the American Film Institute, and it is, of course, the 1933 version of King Kong. King Kong, the 1933 version. The version that is quite often found on so many greatest movies of all time lists. AFI, various other movie listings, Rotten Tomatoes, the whole 9 yards. You know, everybody knows what this movie is. It's easily found. You can find it streaming, YouTube, wherever. It's not a hard thing to find at all, or to own a copy if you should want to own one. So, because this is so popular, I'm just going to breeze through the plot real quick, and we'll talk about some of the particulars in case there's somebody out there who has not seen the 1933 version of King Kong, the original version. So basically what it is that there is a filmmaker who is kind of in debt, and he hears this story about how there's this mythical giant ape, and he wants to film it, capture it, bring it back, and make money, because that's his thing. He wants to make money. So he hires a boat with a sketchy looking crew, brings along an actress because she wants to be in the movie. She's a starving actress, of course, and this is supposed to be her big break, played by Fay Wray. And of course, a couple other people are in there, as well as the hero who ultimately saves Fay Wray from the giant ape. And they go on to this boat, and they find, the filmmaker Jack has a map of Skull Island, where to find Skull Island, how to pierce the fog to get the ship and the men there, so that they can try and capture this huge beast. They get to Skull Island, and they come onto land, and they realize that there's a tribe. There's actually human beings that live on this island, and they live on one side of this gargantuan wall. And they surmise that this is to keep King Kong out. And so the natives see Fay Wray, beautiful blonde goddess, and they're like, oh, we're gonna offer her up to the King Kong so that he doesn't come after us and eat our people. Let them eat the white people for a change, right? So they kidnap Fay Wray off the ship. Her character's name is Anne, and they take her, and they kind of go past the doors of the giant wall, and they tie her to these posts to be sacrificed to King Kong. They blow horns. The men on the ship and the hero and Jack all rush into the jungle to try and save Anne from King Kong. As they're rushing to go in there, King Kong shows up, grabs her, and takes her away with him, and with the heroes in tow. And then a very large portion of the movie is actually stop motion stuff of King Kong and Fay Wray and all the monsters that he beats up and kills in this, as the members of the ship's crew is dwindling, because they're getting killed one by one as they're trying to save the girl. They save her, and as they're running back through the jungle back to the surviving crewmen of the ship, King Kong follows, smashes through the wall, and chases them. And Jack has all these gas bombs and is able to render King Kong unconscious. They manage to get him on the ship, transport him to New York City, where he is presented on stage chained to this weird crossbar thing. At which point Kong gets pretty angry because he's not happy about this. He's fallen in love with Anne, and he's chained up, and this is not just a good day for Kong. And he breaks through the chains and he rampages through the city looking for Anne, and then finding her, capturing her once again, climbing up to the top of the Empire State Building, where 4 biplanes are circling him, shooting at him. He puts Anne down, and we know how the story ends. This is not really a spoiler because we've seen the ending all over the place. Even if it's not the 1933 original version, we know what happens. He falls off the building and dies. And hence one of the famous lines in cinema: no, it wasn't the biplanes that killed him, it was Beauty that killed the Beast. So there you go. There's the plot in total. I don't feel like I'm giving you any spoilers because this is such a well-known movie. I mean, how could you not know how this ends? I mean, with all the sufficient amount of remakes that have been made. So let's get into kind of the details of the movie. This is directed by Marion C. Cooper, who had one of the reasons why Kong was so well received was that the actual monster Kong is because people felt like they were looking at a giant ape. And it turns out that Cooper has experience with actually filming primates, and for stock footage, and also for a couple of actual motion pictures about apes. And so he has some idea of what they should look like, what they move, how they move, and things like that. So when they go on to do the stop motion photography, they're able to get the correct movements of a primate, more or less. You know, the technology is limited at that time. Speaking of which, obviously King Kong is not the first kaiju movie. That would be The Lost World of 1925. Now, interestingly, the stop motion of that movie was what paved the way for King Kong to be made. But some additional things were actually added to make the King Kong 1933 version more exciting and more engaging and drawing the audience in. So as part of the technology, they improved upon the stop motion. They improved on matte painting so that the backgrounds were more lush, more realistic, and more pleasing to the eye, or at least consistent with what was going on in terms of action. They also made heavy use of reverse projection screens behind. Keep in mind, they didn't have green screens at this time or any semblance of CGI, obviously. But so what they would do is they would film things and then do a rear projection behind the animation, the stop motion animation, which was really quite ingenious. And it was enabled to get the actual actors and actresses in front of King Kong, and it seems like he's there with them, and that's kind of the whole point. So they did a really, really good job in 1933, technically speaking, of making this movie. It's you know, even today it kind of stands up. You know, you watch this and you're just like, you're kind of amazed a little bit because the action is actually pretty good. There's a lot of anime that this animation is like really pales in comparison to how King Kong, the original version, was made. So, but interestingly, of course, that this one was made, King Kong was made literally before pre-code era. Pre-code is basically what started the kind of rating systems later on, a few decades later. But basically, pre-code just said you can't have these things in movies because we think they're too suggestive, too violent, too whatever it might be. It's kind of like the Comic Codes Authority. So King Kong had enjoyed a week of pre-code, and then it went into code. And so things got actually cut out, and there was a number of scenes that were cut out and thought lost to the world. And then in the late 50s or early 60s, one print was found of the entire movie. And based on that print, it was rehabbed. It was, they took very good care of bringing this movie back so it can be shown and recorded so that it can be, kept forever. So here's a list. I'm going to go off my notes. Sorry for the little glitch there. I actually hit the wrong button. So anyway, to kind of talk about some of these scenes that were cut originally and for decades were lost, and then were able to be put back in. Let me give you a list of what those were. All right, let me scroll down there. So here are here are the scenes that were cut and then came back. So there's the scene of the Brontosaurus mauling the crewmen in the water. Basically, when the crewmen are trying to save Anne, the Brontosaurus comes after them and basically chases one of the sailors up a tree and essentially eats him. Another one is that Kong undresses Ann Darrow, that's the Fay Wray character, and sniffs his fingers afterwards. Yeah, it's kind of creepy a little bit. Kong biting and stepping on natives when he attacks the village. Yes, I remember seeing two different versions of this as a kid. Like the first version did not have the mauling and almost complete genocide of the natives by Kong, but then when I saw this version, he's literally like picking people up and chewing off their heads. Essentially doing the same thing in New York City. That's another scene. Then there is a very troubling scene where Kong thinks he's found Anne, and he grabs this woman out of her apartment, looks at her and goes, "Oh, that's not her," and drops her from like 20 stories up. I mean, it's kind of brutal. And then there's all the scenes of like insects and other predators on Skull Island, basically whittling down the crewmen from the ship one by one in for that time in 1933, very gruesome detail. So that's kind of what when the pre-code or the code era for films kind of did. They kind of took things like that out of it. Now, obviously, when we watch it today, it seems tame by comparison to what we actually watch in movies of today. We're actually far more almost Goro-like in our movies. So yeah, it's just a very, very interesting movie from a technical point of view. If you are into that kind of thing, then King Kong 1933 is going to be right up your alley. You're going to enjoy it. And it's just a good, fun little kaiju movie. Now, of course, King Kong would go on, and there would be a couple, actually more than a couple versions of it later on. There's a really bad 1976 version. Which I'm not even going to talk about. It's just horrible. Then of course we have the various versions over the past few years in the MonsterVerse. There was King Kong in the Godzilla movies of the 60s and the 70s, and where he it's kind of like first the villain, and then he kind of teams up with Godzilla with Godzilla against another villain. So yeah, he's who does not know what King Kong is or who he is. So yeah, if you have not seen it, please avail yourself of watching this movie. It's a fun thing to watch. It's about 100 minutes long, the original version. If you watch the redacted version, that's about 85-90 minutes, if I remember correctly. So yeah, should you watch King Kong 1933 version? Abso-freaking-lutely you should. Like I said, get yourself some popcorn, get some friends, sit down and just watch the movie and talk about it afterwards. You're gonna be amazed with what this thing from 1933 it can do. So that's it for this week. If you want to watch King Kong, the original version, 1933, by all means do so. I heartily endorse it. Have a good time with your friends watching it. Speaking of watching kaiju movies, of course, that is the 4th out of 5 kaiju movies that I wanted to review this season. The last one, of course, going to be the original version, 1954, I think, of Godzilla, of course, the king of all kaijus. So we are going to do a watch party on that. I will let you know the date next week. It will, of course, be on SciTube. The thing is that it's going to have ads. So just to warn you, it's not going to be a straight through movie. We're going to be watching ads as well. But I'll talk about more of that later. So yeah, so that'll be the 5th thing that we do, and then I'll do a little review of Godzilla, and that'll be it for all the kaiju movies of this season. And then we're gonna start talking about holiday anime and what's going to happen after December 31st for this channel. All right, thank you as always for stopping by and watching the video. Please take care of yourselves, do what you need to do to stay healthy and stay good, because I love you guys, and I hope to see you in person at a convention at some point in the future. So yeah, have a great day, enjoy the Thanksgiving leftovers, and watch more anime.